You are listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast exploring Scripture and all things related to it. New episodes are released daily. For more information, check out glossahouse.com and subscribe to our channels on Spotify and YouTube. Welcome and enjoy.
I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to continue on in our Greek reading group. Thanks for joining us. And we're making progress. On the left side there is the Greek text, and I haven't changed anything much. We kind of rushed to finish the end there, verse 27, but we did see a series of purpose clauses with ina, and there's kind of like a cascading set of means to ends, and then that means that end, to sanctify the church. So men, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, in order that, so Christ loving and giving himself for her, that is the church, has as its goal that he would sanctify her. Okay, cleansing with the washing of water, probably metaphor for baptism, I would suspect, in the word. So the word is has an effect. It is itself a means to the end of cleansing, which is a part of what it means to be sanctified. So sanctified has to do with being in relationship to God, being made like God, and involves cleansing, purification, and the word purifies. The word of God has as its goal a fellowship to bring us back into or to sustain relationship. And when we are in relationship with God, we can't help but be sanctified. And that's why believers are called the saints. And this is a high calling. It's a calling and a reality that we're called into. And so then this in order that this sanctification and this cleansing, this itself is a means towards an end as well, in order that he himself would present for himself glorious the church, present the church glorious for himself. And so there's interesting abutment of ideas, again, in the center of a chiasm. So the subject is abutted to this reflexive pronoun, and this reflexive pronoun in the dative, referring back to the subject. I just saw in BDAG, actually, I maybe still have it up, that that the pronoun can be used in the dative for emphasis. The simple dative may also be used to emphasize the subject as agent. So that's, I think, what's happening here. It sounds kind of odd and cumbersome to translate it. So in order that he himself would present for himself glorious the church. So you have an abutment of avtos and eauto, which is for effect, and then you have the abutment of the predicate adjective with the church. And in a sense, you have a double accusative here, except one of them is a predicate adjective. So you're going to present the church to be something. Some verbs can take two objects. You can make something into something. In Greek, when you have that kind of verb that has a valency that's able to make something into something, or two things are involved in the transfer of action in the verb. It's called a bivalent verb. We often call those kinds of verbs the accusatives. Often it's an accusative case that they take double accusatives. And in this case, the second accusative, or really the thing that the church is made to be, is an adjective. It's a quality. And in this case, it's the word glorious. To present the church glorious. Now, last time I was sharing with you this chiasm, this repeated working of ideas to a center, and the center has to do with Christ and the body in different way, or the church and himself. And then here, he himself, for himself, glorious the church. This is again the center. And then I also suggested that if you were present last time, that this word endoxon, it's an unusual word, and when it occurs with the word like present, to me, this is a visible social reality, that there's something manifest about this. But then the doxon too is construed. It's not just doxos, which means like glory, doxa. It's endoxos. It's like this inner character that though is manifest. So there's a glory that is inside that is becoming manifest. And in the context, this is a cleansing. It's a cleansed, holy, sanctified body of Christ. That this is what Christ is working for. This is what he wants. He wants his people, his bride, to be glorious and to reflect that manifestation. Now, so I was suspicious that this word glorious was a social term. And indeed it is. So here I'm showing you some research from that I have in my In Step with God's Word, looking at this in doxos. I began searching the inscriptions database called PHI, Packard's Humanity Inscriptional Database. If you've not found that, it's online. You can use it for free. You just have to agree to their terms. So I did a search on Indoxos, and what I found is that indeed it has a very high concentration of use in Asia Minor, which is where Paul is writing. Now, there's a higher percentage of words in Greater Syria and the East. So that's nearby. That's very much nearby. But you can see that there are a lot of instances of this word and high concentration in these areas. And so I took two inscriptions and translated them. And each one happened to involve the imperial cult priesthood. So you can see here's the inscription, a little bit about it, and then my translation of it. So this is you can see it's talking about good lineage, love of country, from a manifest and honored ancestry. So it's talking about the ancestry and being particularly honored. And then here, there's someone looks like initiated into the imperial mysteries or something like that. And so a name that is rather honored and revered. So this just says that in the culture, this word is an almost like an honorific, praiseworthy kind of title. And so Christ is indeed working things out so that the church could be recognized to be glorious. And that's kind of encouraging. I mean, particularly when today the church is being ragged upon and there's a lot of problems. We do need to submit to the sanctification that Christ is wanting. And he loves us, gave himself in order that we would be sanctified and cleansed by the word. We have to be submitting to that process of sanctification, and that this is for a future, I guess a present, but I think also a future manifestation, like a revealing that we will be glorious. Not having any kind of wrinkle or blemish or any such thing as this, but rather than that, in order that indeed the church would be holy and blameless. So that's what God is wanting for his people. And that's is especially relevant today. He wants that now. He wants that now. He's working for that right now. Okay, so that's where we left off, and I'm gonna maybe get this translation down here, and let's keep moving. So utos, thus, ought. This is the verb aphelu, a fellow, philo. So third plural. The husbands ought also. So here I'm going to do some marking. Husbands ought to also. So this is use of ke that is emphasizing the husbands, particularly in their role of oughting to love. Now, this is an infinitive. This is an alpha contract verb from agapao. And when that ending comes up with against the infinitive ending present, this is actually two epsilons combined to form an epsilon iota. So in the infinitive formation, this epsilon, this ending is really two epsilons come together. And so what happens then is that these each take on the alpha one at a time. And what results is an alpha. The alpha wins out. So this is a kind of a difficult ending to recognize. It actually is an infinitive. And it's completing the meaning. It's a complementary infinitive with a philo. Thus, also husbands ought to love, and then they love whom? Their own wives, the wives of themselves, their own wives. And then as ta eoton somata, as their own bodies. So this bracket here is to indicate that you have a subordinate clause, and this is an os clause, and it's resupplying the verb loving. So the husbands ought to love their wives as they ought to love their own bodies. Okay, so this is a really important point here. The husband's love of self is to be present and manifest in how he loves his wife. He should love himself and he should love his wife. There should be a parity between those loves. So now we're going to get a little bit more details about what this looks like. How does one show love, or in what kinds of ways? I mean, verse 28 is a generalized statement, so it applies. It could be many different ways that we do show love, appropriate love. And so what does that look like? There's also then Paul just adds just a little clarifying statement that the one loving his own wife loves himself. So there you go. This indicates the parity, the correspondingness of it. So really there's need for husbands and men in general to have a appropriate understanding of self-love. And that isn't automatic. I think there's many people who don't know how to love. And to the extent that they don't know how to love themselves, don't know how to love, they're going to be hampered from loving their own wives. So it's really incumbent in our formation as people, particularly as men and husbands, to know how to appropriately love ourselves. It means protecting ourselves from addictions. It means setting up boundaries. It means not giving in to things. It means maintaining our integrity. It means respecting our time and whatnot. You could just go on, taking care of our bodies, eating properly, sleeping appropriately. And to the extent that we don't do that to ourselves, for ourselves, we're not going to be able to love our wives. There's a correspondence, is what Paul is saying. There needs to be a correspondence, and it needs to be a healthy love. Obviously, that's what we're talking about, a healthy kind of love. Now, if you haven't seen my post recently, just released was a new podcast that I'm doing with my counseling friend, Pat Holly. It's called Holy Love. So we're talking about these very things. Holy love, holy meaning entire. And I think God wants us to love entirely, expansively. So if you're looking for some insight into this and want to hear a conversation between a biblical theologian, exegete, and a counselor with many years of experience helping couples, this could be a podcast that could help you. Yeah. So, for no one, verse 29, udis gar pote, tein eautu sarka, amisesen ala ek trafike thalpi avtein, kathos ke o Christos tein ecclesian. All right. So what is this verse about? This is a supporting statement. You obviously have a a supporting conjunction, gar. This is providing support for the claim that he's just made. No one. So udes is highlighted there because it's a quantifying. It specifies a quantity, and here negative. No one. No one ever. So ever is an adverb. No one at one time or ever hates his own flesh. This is the direct object of the verb emisesen. There's the ending sen. This is from miseo epsilon contract. This is an aorist, cut off the augment. So no one ever hates his own body. Okay, this is ideally speaking. I mean, I think there's always kind of an understanding that a person should and does not hate his own body. Although I know there are desperate situations where people might hate themselves because of how poorly they were treated and that kind of stuff. So Paul is speaking in general and a little bit idealistically, I guess that typically speaking, people care. They have a self understanding of need to care for oneself, even if that is perverted and off whack. So he's making a generalized argument here that basically, normally a person does not hate themselves. Okay, so if it obtains, he's going to explain that a little bit more. So no one hates himself, but and here's how we this is the correction. So this Allah is working to correct the negative u. So you have a u Allah construction. The Allah is marking correction, but particularly how do people take care of themselves? How do they show love? Well, they nourish, ektrafi, present active indicative for singular, and cherish, thalpi. So they cherish their bodies. So sarka here refers to like the physical flesh, kind of like a person as construed as a physical body that needs care, and here particularly food. So a person typically takes care of their body, and even people who are, plagued with all kinds of self-hatred and this kind of stuff, they take care of their body at a certain level, right? They eat. So everyone has that kind of sense that they should take care of their body, even if they're in a poor situation. Just as here we have a comparison, just as Christ, the church. So ke is helping accentuate the also. This is thematic addition. Christ, and then there's the assumption, feeds and cherishes the church. So these verbs are kind of resupplied here, and then church is the direct object. So there's a correspondence, right, between a person taking care of their body and Christ taking care of the church. Like Christ provides for the church, its well-being. Verse 30 then adds a subordinate clause to that, because we are members of his body. So here we have another supporting statement. The OT is a content marker that can indicate also support depending on the context. And here we have this affirmative statement of why, to support why Christ feeds and cherishes the church, because we are his body. So the church is the body of Christ. So this is extending the metaphor of Christ as the head and the church is his body. And so, of course, Christ is going to take care of his body. And because he's the head is the source in a sense, right? Eating food to take care. This is where the food comes in. He provides nourishment as head of the body, and we are members of his body. So there's a set of analogies that Paul is drawing upon. Christ, the church, husband, wife, husband to his body, husband to his flesh. And the husband ought to treat his wife like he treats his flesh. So there needs to be a mutuality. And all of this is modeled after Christ and the church. In fact, I would posit that the husband-wife relationship is mirrored and dependent upon, from eternity, God's decision to create and, if needed, relate to a people group. And that's Christ and the church. So from eternity and God's foreseeing the plan, whether there would be a fall or not, still he was going to be in relationship to a body of people. That plan of God is the template really for the husband-wife relationship. The husband-wife relationship is then supposed to be pointing towards this beautiful union relationship between Christ and the church. It's supposed to be pointing to that reality. Okay, so yeah, because we're members of his body. Now, members, melos is plural. It's neuter word, melos, mele. It's discontinuous with its genitive modifier. So members, typically the verb kind of indicates like a boundary in the sentence. So to split members from his body is called discontinuous. To put the modifier on the other side, one or both of those elements can be stressed. So it is a device that is, I guess we're still there. There was a little bit of a glitch right there. So yeah, it is a what's called a discontinuous construction. And I'm not sure I can discern where there is particular stress or prominence there. But yeah, so we're members of his body. Okay, so we're moving right along. These are great verses. Verse 31, antituto. At this point, we are getting a direct quotation. So the antituto is a prepositional phrase that's functioning like a kind of like a conjunction. Yeah, so I do see a question. Let me take that. So someone's noticing this is the first time that melos is used. It's interesting that he just assumes his audience familiarity with the body metaphor as he does, for example, explains in 1 Corinthians 12. I'm not sure this is the first. I mean, this is the first instance of melos. The body metaphor has been evoked already. If we go to 4, there's going to be a mention, there is one body. There is this kind of individual members of it. We are to grow up into him who is our head. So if we go to, here, I'll turn this on. So the whole body grows into the head. So this is indeed not the first time that the head body metaphor has been used. but maybe it is the first time that melos is used, but we do have reference to individuated members. As you can see, like here, each individual part. So we do have the metaphor already evoked that we are the head, that he's the head of, and we're members of his body. We can also look at 123. The church is his body. He is the head. So the metaphor has already been activated pretty thoroughly in Ephesians. But yeah, the use of mele there, melos, is, I guess, the first time. Yeah. So why is that? So here you can see in the UB, I guess this is UBS text, the Greek. This is their way of saying there's a direct quotation or a strong allusion, is putting the Greek text in bold. And indeed, this is coming from Genesis 2:24. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And that's basically what Paul is saying here. That's how we translate it. It's not too difficult. A person. So for this reason, this is just kind of an idiom. It's taking it up from the Septuagint. We have future tense, kata lipo, future third singular, a person, anthropos, but in context, obviously talking about a man, a husband. He leaves his father and his mother and will be joined to his wife. So I'm double underlining wife here because this verb with pros takes the dative as its direct object, will be joined to his wife. And as a result, the two will be as one flesh, will be one flesh. Now, this use of is with the verb of being is probably, I think it reflects the Hebrew le, the preposition le used in that context. There is a sense of directionality, maybe goal, purpose, outcome. Like this is what happens when married people come together. They become one entity, one flesh. And this, we may tend to think of it in terms of sex expression and oneness that comes from that. But in antiquity, it may have meant more than that in terms of the commitment to care, to be under one household. There may have been more entailed with what that meant. They become unified in a very profound sense, economically, socially, everything. And I think we should recover that, that sense that the marriage relationship is that precious and strong, that it needs to be bounded and protected, and not fluid and open, and so much, there's so much sleeping around and not taking this union seriously, and protecting its integrity. So yeah, so Paul is here talking about and his point is, we have to ask, why is he quoting from this passage of Genesis? He's talking about this, the husband-wife relationship. Well, it has to do, I think, particularly with the one flesh. The two become one flesh. This is what he's been really pushing, is that the husband loves his own flesh, and he needs to love his wife as himself. And really part of the rationale for that is, indeed, they are considered in scriptural testimony one flesh. And so this is a big one that he quotes from here, a big text, that important scriptural testimony to support the argument that he's making. So we'll take a step back and look at how he's framed and executed his discussion of the household codes. So husband, wife, children, parent, and then slave, master. Paul has reordered those relationships against the standard ordering in other treatments of household relationships. So he's changed the order, and he's done so for theological reasons. And since maybe I should talk about it now, this observation. So basically, why does he start with a husband-wife relationship? Well, he's able to then go to Genesis 1 and talk about the union of man and wife, a husband and wife, appealing to Genesis 2. And then he goes on to talk about the second set of relationships in terms of parent, child, and children and fathers. And then he quotes from scripture there. Okay, so this scripture has to do with living long on the land, or is it on the earth? The word gay can mean both land or earth. Now, yeah, so now we're talking about not just the beginning of creation, but now we're talking about living long on the land. And then the last household relationship that he takes up is slaves or servants and masters. And while there is no scripture quoted, instead what we get is eschatological judgment. In other words, end of time. So Paul has effectively framed his discussion of household relationships around creation, protology, and eschatology, that everyone is going to be held accountable before God. And he's going to reward everyone according to what he has done. So this is quite significant. It shows that he understands the relationships theologically, and I would say even Christologically. All relationships are now re-understood in light of Christ. Okay, so this brings us getting close to the end here. We're moving kind of quickly. I hope not too quickly, but there's a lot to talk about. Now, verse 32, to mysterion tuto mega estin ego de lego is Christon ke is tein ecclesian. This mystery is great. Moreover, I am speaking to Christ and to the church. Okay, well, what do we do with this verse? First thing I note that we should note is that there is no connector. There's a syndeton. There's no conjunction. So this could mean close connection in terms of like a parallelism, like a rhetorical flourish. I don't see that though. I don't see a rhetorical flourish. So then we have to take seriously that the connection, there could be there's some other relationship then between these verses. It could be general to particular, but I don't really see that. One kind of move can be explanation, and that does make sense here, that maybe there is in fact an explanation, and this kind of does feel like a type of an explanation. This mystery is great. This seems like an explanation because this is pointing to what has just been talked about. And so what is it that he's just been talked about? Well, he's just been talking about the two becoming one flesh. So I think that is indeed the mystery, is that husband and wife coming together, how they become one flesh. There is a type of mystery to that, a wonderful union. Now what follows is adding a distinctive development. And there is I'm writing out distinctive. It's kind of slow, but distinctive or new development. So this is adding something new or distinctive. Okay, the subject is specified. This really becomes a meta comment because Paul is drawing attention to his own self speaking. So I myself, moreover. So I think this I might translate it moreover. I myself am speaking to Christ and to the church. And so I think this is added on as the fact that alongside of the husband-wife relationship, there's a more fundamental reality that he's been talking about all along, and that is Christ in relationship to the church. So again, the husband-wife relationship, there's a mystery about it, how God has made us that way, but that relationship is subordinated to the Christ and church reality. And in fact, I'd even say it's predicated upon that reality. And that's what he's been showing throughout. And that as we look at the structuring of the passage, in fact, the two people that keep showing up in the middle at the hinge points of these are, in fact, Christ and the church, and the role of Christ in relationship to the church. And so, what are we to learn about the husband wife relationship? Well, we better keep looking at the Christ church relationship, how he loved and gave himself sacrificially for the church. That seems to be an important thing. And he has a goal of presenting her spotless and blameless. There is a regard that Christ has for the church. So, do husbands have that regard for their wives? Do they love their wives as their own body? That's another aspect of it. This kind of mutuality that the love of husband has is to be complete and encompass his wife. There should be no inequality with that. So there is this profound analogy of Christ and the church. Now, unfortunately, I think people will think in terms of authority, and she's got to submit, and Christ has authority over the church. Well, that's not how it's presented in this passage. He's presented as head, true, but he's also presented as someone who cherishes and nourishes. In other words, provides for the body. And so there's this cherishing and nourishing. There's also a concern for the word of God. And so is there a sense that a husband needs to be helping feed his wife in a sense, like Christ would feed the church in that way? And then also need to remember that the Christ loves through sacrificial offering and giving. And of course, he did that in a way truthfully and with purpose, with aim. And so husbands need to be in relationship with their wives in a way that is purposeful and with that aim of helping the other grow, helping the other grow. So just as they love their body, they should be loving their wives as a part of their body. So, yeah. So Paul is speaking about two things, but the more fundamental reality is Christ and the church. Yes. So I see a question here. Concerning the east in verse 32, are you translating it to, but shouldn't we translate it as I'm speaking concerning with respect to Christ and the church? Marker of specific point of reference, for, to, with respect to, with reference to. Yeah. Yeah, it's often translated that way, with reference to. But the directionality of east is towards or into or goal. So is there a sense that he's speaking for or to, into the reality, into the relationship? in the sense that he's speaking to advocate for or to inform or to bring light into these relationships. So, I mean, I think if we translate this with respect to, fine, we can get there. But it seems to me that the ease is marking something more than just concerning. Like Paul could have used uper. He could have used there's another one, kata, maybe according to, there's another uper or peri. He could have used uper or peri. He doesn't. Those could be concerning or about. So if we mean with respect to as equivalent to concerning or about, we're not observing what's there in the Greek text. It seems to me that Paul, given the extent of the careful structuring, he is wanting to convey something for understanding the goal, to understand who Christ is and who the church is. It seems, in other words, that his discourse is more purposeful, and that's what and directional, and that is what the ease would help convey. To translate it with respect to or about may obscure that a bit. Now we can get it structurally. We can see that he's really wanted to convey something here. And the question is what? What does he really want to convey here? Why is he really going after this? I would maintain that he is countering Roman imperial propaganda, which under Augustus and subsequently was trying to infiltrate and influence family relationships, dictating legislation, this kind of stuff. And Paul seems to me is really going out of his way to establish Christ as savior of the body, not Caesar with Roma, the personification of the Roman people. That's not the primary fundamental reality in the world. In the Roman world, that was the fundamental reality. You had Caesar, who was ahead of the Roman people, his body. So this is depicted in Seneca's De Clementia, written for the young Emperor Nero, written around 54, 55. And this is part of the political ideology of the day. This is the governing worldview reality that people are seeing on statuary, coins, cult, parades, events, civic affairs, games. This is what people are seeing. This is that the ultimate reality is indeed the emperor. And I could show you this in the coin, the Augustea, the Gemma Augustea. This is not a coin. It's actually a gemstone that was engraved, and this dates to around AD 10. Onyx. So here's Roma. Right there's Roma sitting next to the deified Emperor Augustus, who is being crowned by the inhabited world, ruling. And by the way, he's in the heavenly realms right here. This is heavenly realms. This is Jupiter, eagle, represented by the eagle. He's a divinity. He's Jupiter-like, sitting on this throne with his consort, Roma, the personification of the Roman people. What I would suggest to you is that the focus on Christ as Savior of the church, his body, is countering this prevalent ideology. And Paul is basically saying and laying claim to the household space belongs to Christ. That is Christ's space. Every relationship, husband, wife, parent, child, master, servant, is subordinated to the reality of Christ and church, which is countering this alternative reality. So I think what I'm saying is that there's a lot of I think there's more to the east than would meet the eye. Like he's making a meta comment about what he himself is speaking into for. In other words, as he's making this comparison of husband-wife to Christ the church, he is really advocating for an understanding of the ultimate reality, the profound model of Christ in relation to the church. And we have to ask why. Why is he stressing this so much? Why is he putting them in the center of these structures, abutting them together in the middle? Why is he showing this profound unity? And I would suggest it's because of the prevailing political ideology, which would rather elevate the Senate, the Roman people, or other political entities. And for Paul, that is to be re-understood as the ultimate political entity that should shape our worldview and form us, and form us as people is in fact Christ and the church. Christ as the head, Christ ascended to the right hand of God the Father, far above all of the rule, power, authority, lordship, and every name being named, not only in this age, but in the age to come. Right. So that's from the resurrection in chapter 1. That's basically was quoting there. And he's done all things for the church, who is the fulfillment of the one who fulfills all things in all ways. So the church is where it's at. The church is that important in the world. Remember that in Ephesians 3:10, that it's that God is making known through making known to the rulers, human scale, and to the authorities in the heavenly realms through the church. The church is the vehicle through which God's manifold wisdom is made known. That's how important the church is. The church, and that's why it's so important that we're holy and sanctified and cleansed and purified. Because to the extent that we're not, we're failing in revealing God's wisdom. And wisdom is a huge concept, right? Wisdom has to do with like how to live well in this world. Like the church needs to be living well in this world. We need to be healthy in our relationships, devout in our commitments, and faithful in our lives. Faithful. Yeah. So, all right. Verse 33. However, now it seems kind of a weird place to say nevertheless. So here it's almost like there is a pulling back from this theme of Christ and the church. We're part of that reality, but now he's gonna zero in back to get real nitty gritty to the reality of husband and wife. We're going to see how he does that. There's a lot of emphasis in these verses, a lot of prominence devices. So the plane itself is a connector which is disjunctive. There is a bit of it's an adversative. There's a little bit of a break between what he's just said, and it's really to pull back the audience to recognize their roles as husband and wife. Also, you, there's an adverb, you. And then here we have appositional. So this is explicit pronouns. You, however, also you, the ones according to each one, according to one, each one. So there's like another level of apposition. So you is plural. Then the kath ina is plural, and it's appositional. So this is also plural, but then the kath ina is kata ina. Kath is a prepositional form, right? It's got the aspirated, the rough breathing mark makes that turn from kata to kath. This marks distribution. If you look at kata with the accusative, it can indicate distribution. And so this is distributing the pluralness to each one. So there's a pretty significant construction here, a piling up. And so it's really piled up because this distribution then is going to receive another appositional statement, each. So there's like a grammatical shifting across three different things. You got you plural, appositional that has a distribution element to one, and then you have another zeroing in each one. So it's what's kind of interesting, what's achieved here, it's almost like the church as a plural reality is now being unpacked, because the church is a corporate entity, but in fact, it's made up of yous, you plural, and then each ones, and then each one. So that's what's happening here, is it's being decompressed. And you can see this decompression through these appositional statements, so that eventually it's an ekastos, each one. Pretty amazing to see how that occurs. I call that a decompression. I think that's a good way to describe that. He's unpacking what the church is, and that indicates why there's disjunction here. He's going to unpack this, bring it to a conclusion. Each one his own wife, thus let him love. So notice that it's his own wife. It's not men loving wives. We're not into polygamy here. In fact, it's so clear that the relationship has integrity, and it's not women subordinating to all men. No, it's a wife willingly submitting to her own husband. That is the context here. So here we have each one, each man, each husband, each one, let him love his own wife, his own wife. So this is double underlined as the direct object of love. Let him love. This is a third singular imperative form. As himself, and this os is a conjunction, and it often has an implied verb, and the verb is simply just resupplies. Let him love his own wife as he loves himself, understood. All right. Moreover, da indicates a distinctive new development. The wife, Ina, in order that she fears her husband. Well, you're wondering, well, where's the verb? What is the wife supposed to be doing? What verb do we resupply here? That's the question mark. What's the verb? Well, I would suggest to you, you get it from the context. And what's the last verb that's been given? Well, agapao. I think let the wife love in order that she fear or revere her husband. So I think this verb love is re-understood, not there, but to set up the ina clause. So I think this ina is the end of her love. She is to love her husband as the means to respect and revere him. That is the means. Love. Yeah, so that's how I would take it. Now, alternatively, one could reassume that maybe the verb implied is the verb to be, and let it be, let it be that, or the wife, it should be the wife that she loves her or fears her husband. Maybe it could be that the woman is that this phrase is proleptically taken out of its clause. So in other words, there is a construction where you can pull out something to front it before the clause, to put stress on it. And here the clause would be ina. So moreover, that the wife fear her husband, in which case then you still have the problem of what verb is there being, what verb exists there. And you'd have to maybe supply, let it be that. So, moreover, let it be the wife pulled forward that she fear her man, her revere her husband. Those are possibilities. I do think, though, I don't think that we have a proleptic pulling it out of the ina clause. And so I think if you look at grammars, they might say, oh, this is an example of a imperatival ina or something like that. And I think that's kind of creating a category to explain some pragmatics, what's happening in use of in the text. And so, we just have to be honest here that a lot of times you have ellipsis, you have verbs supplied from the context. In fact, the whole passage begins with the wives acting with the verb re-understood from the previous. This is re-understood. So this phenomena of ellipsis occurs a lot. So let's just go with the simplest explanation. And this passage is framed by the wife's action coming from the previous verse. So why not, or statement, so why not just simply re-understand this as the verb? I mean, this construction occurs all the time. And then people might say, well, wait a minute. I mean, Paul has not been saying that wives ought to love. That's not been a part of his argument. Well, au contraire, Paul has been saying a lot about love. In fact, I had a discussion with Nick Grosso from Biblingo about this, and he's like, I don't know that I agree with you on this. It just seems kind of odd, And I said, well, and then he says, we don't see this in other household codes. And I'm like, well, actually, the set of household commands in Colossians is preceded and framed by the command of all believers to love. You can see that beyond all these things, put on love, which is perfect bond of unity. I would say this emphasis on mutuality of submission and love is especially true of Ephesians. Let us walk in love just as Christ loved us and gave himself as an offering. That's 5:1 and 2. We're to speak the truth in love. We're to love. So I don't know. I think it's appropriate. I think it'd be wise and appropriate for Paul to equally apply love for both marriage parties by implying the verb to love at the end of the argument. And I think that same implying happened with submitting. We're to mutually submit. And then it's not just wives submitting. And so now it's not just husbands who are loving, it's by implication wives are supposed to love as well. Well, so the question is, why do you think Paul uses the ina with subjunctive for wives, but the imperative agapato for husbands? Isn't the imperative stronger than the subjunctive? Well, I think this is exactly the point. I don't think that he has. I think he's using ellipsis. He's re-understanding agapato for the wives. Moreover, let the wives love for the goal of respecting the man, the husband. So I think both have the obligation to love. And this is common sense. I think we know this. We know that marriage is supposed to be mutually loving. I think there's also supposed to be a mutual submission as well. So, well, what a fun way to end. Thinking about the grammar and being straight and thinking through what's implied. I think we take the simplest route, and that is to resupply the previous verb. And to me, it makes sense. A wife loves, and I think she's got to love and regard and care for her husband. And this is going to help her to respect and revere him as her husband. I think that does make sense. So, well, I hope you found this helpful and to think more deeply about the text. And so we'll see you next time.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.